Good luck.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock on Sunday, the 20th of October, and this is the weekend on GB News. A packed show coming up for you, so don't you dare move a muscle out there. The Health Secretary is set to hand out smart medical tech to monitor serious health conditions as part of a 10-year plan to save the NHS. Good idea or waste of taxpayers' cash? Your cash, remember. Then the King and Queen have begun their landmark tour of Australia by joining a church congregation for Sunday service. But it's not been without controversy, as Republican protesters took their chance to make their feelings known. Our royal reporter is there live for us. And the next generation of trainee teachers says lessons on colonialism, slavery and the lasting impact of imperialism should be taught to kids as young as 5, and say that Christianity should not be taught in religious studies. I've got no idea, shaking my head already here. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is The Weekend. Well, I hope you're having a smashing weekend out there. Thank you very much for joining me this Sunday lunchtime. We have indeed got a very, very packed show for you. So if the weather's miserable where you are, just, put the kettle on, pull up a chair and sit and enjoy the show. Because this show is all about you. It's nothing without you and your views. And it's really, really easy to get involved in the conversation or have a chat about anything you want to have a chat about. Very simple. Go to gbnews.com/your say and join in our conversation, what we're chatting about. Keeping me company on today's show, we have the wonderful husband and wife team, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and former Conservative Special Advisor Claire Pearsall. Thank you very much for joining me today. Claire is fresh from mucking out her horses. Although there were some wags who thought that's where you've been spending the night because you've been a bad boy. One of those relationships. But before we get into today's show, let's get these news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you very much. The top stories this afternoon. The Health Secretary will promise to turn the NHS into a neighbourhood health service as he launches a major consultation about the institution's next decade. Wes Streeting is set to invite patients and NHS staff to take part in a national conversation to shape the government's 10-year plan for the service next week. Millions of people are set to receive health monitoring smartwatches as well as part of Labour's 10-year plan to save the NHS. Well, the party pledged to build an NHS fit for the future. Announcing the consultation today, Mr Streeting said if we want to save the things we love about the NHS, then we have to change it.
There will be a big focus in the budget around the investment in things like capital and tech so that we can make the system more efficient. But even where we're doing things like the 40,000 more appointments every week, that will also be achieved through reformed ways of working so we get more bang for the buck because, you know, people are feeling the pinch in their pockets at the moment.
Elsewhere, those cheating the benefit system could have their bank accounts raided by the Department for Work and Pensions. Private companies like airlines will also be forced to hand over information under new plans being drawn up by ministers, according to the Sunday Telegraph. The crackdown is set to be launched as part of Rachel Reeves' first budget next month, with the total savings set to be £1.6 billion over the course of the Parliament. Some have criticised the announcement for being too intrusive, but the Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall says it's absurd that the current measures have become so outdated. Official figures show the total cost of fraud to the economy last year was a record £7.3 billion. Now, the Prime Minister says the whole country is behind Sir Chris Hoy following his terminal cancer diagnosis. Sir Keir Starmer posted on X today saying such sad news. Chris is a British sporting legend. To face his diagnosis with such positivity is inspiring. The 48-year-old's been given a diagnosis and has 2 to 4 years left to live. Sir Chris told the Sunday Times, as unnatural as it feels, this is nature. He also told the newspaper he's known for a year that his cancer's terminal. In February, as he was undergoing treatment, including chemotherapy, Sir Chris said he felt forced to reveal his cancer diagnosis publicly. He's the third most decorated British Olympian of all time, with 6 career golds and a silver medal. King Charles and Queen Camilla joined a church congregation in Sydney today for a Sunday service on the first day of engagements during their tour of Australia. It's the King's first visit to Australia since he became monarch in September 2 years ago. It's also the biggest trip the King has made since starting cancer treatment in February. Now, their 6-day visit to the Commonwealth country will involve celebrating the nation's people, the culture and heritage. Following that church service today, some young children who'd engaged with the royal couple spoke of their experience.
She asked me where we did Sunday school.
What did she say?
Over there.
Anyone else speak?
Yeah, he was asking us if we knew what the Bible was and if we studied it and if we had tests on it.
Wow. Anybody else?
She asked something. She asked about the congregation or something.
And what was it like to meet the King and Queen?
Really?
Fans in the UK and around the world are holding vigils this weekend in memory of Liam Payne, the One Direction star who died on Wednesday. A memorial event is planned to take place in London's Hyde Park in around an hour's time, with fans encouraged to bring letters, drawings and flowers. His bandmate Zayn Malik announced he'll reschedule his US tour after the heartbreaking death. Liam's sister also paid tribute to her late brother. Liam's father visited the Casa Sur Hotel in Argentina yesterday, where his son died. In other news, Moldovans head to the polls today to vote for both the presidential election and an EU referendum. The vote could decide whether the country moves closer to Europe or back towards Russia. Moldova applied to join the bloc after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And the UK is braced for destructive weather as a danger to life warnings issued by the Met Office. The entirety of Scotland and Northern Ireland are under a yellow warning for wind. Further south, the Met Office has issued a yellow warning for the southwest of England and South Wales until midday today, with a threat of disruption to travel with flooding and possible interruptions to power supplies. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
Hello, thank you very much, Tatiana. And right, OK, we have got a packed show for you. Just want to say hello to a few of you. Grumpy Grandad, good, it's Dawn. Thank you very much for getting in touch. Remember, show's all about you, gbnews.com/your say. I want to hear what you've got to say. what are your opinions on the subjects we're talking about, especially this one coming up. Wes Streeting promises to turn the NHS into a neighbourhood health service as he launches a major consultation of for the institute of the next decade. The Health Secretary wants to invite patients and NHS staff to take part in a national conversation to shape the government's 10-year plan for the service. Part of this plan is to give millions of people smartwatch devices to track blood pressure, glucose spikes and monitor how cancer patients are responding to treatment. OK, now this story's in a lot of your papers today. Big talking point, the NHS, Wes Streeting is making big announcements tomorrow. So let's see what my wonderful panel make of this one first. I'm going to come to you first on this one, Nigel Nelson, because you are the Labour supporter, covering themselves in glory so far, aren't they, 100+ days on? What do you make of this? I mean, you know, 10 years to sort the NHS out. We've heard all this before, but smartwatches and
I think it's a great idea.
Right, you would, wouldn't you? Yeah. OK. Yeah.
The whole point of what Wes Streeting is doing is, first of all, to say, look, the NHS must reform. His phrase is reform or die. But he also recognises it's not just about money. Money has to come into it. It's going to need extra money, but it's not just that. It's the way of actually making it work better. So the idea of using tech for this is that at the moment, if you've got high blood pressure or diabetes, you have to go to a hospital or a GP once a month. Instead, you would wear a smartphone, and if your glucose levels, your blood pressure went too high, your phone would ring and tell you, by the way, your smartphone says that you're going to danger levels. What it should mean is you won't need to do those constant GP hospital visits to monitor yourself because you'll be self-monitoring.
Claire, speaking as someone who hasn't seen a GP for 3 years now, is this just another way of just making us sort of like, you know, more reliant on digital tech and phoning the GP rather than actually seeing a medical professional?
Yeah, it is. And the really irritating thing about it, well, there are many irritating things, let's be fair. The first one is, well, where is all this information going? So it comes up on your smartwatch that you've got a problem with your blood pressure, with your sugar, whatever. And it's beamed to who?
Neighbourhood Health Centre.
Is that commonly known as a GP surgery?
No, this is something new. So
So should we just, you know, scale back from that for a second, shall we? So where's the information going? Who is going to be looking at it?
Doctors.
And what is going to be done? So if you've got a real problem, so a doctor, medical professional is going to phone you. Anybody who has tried to phone a medical professional will just be sitting there going, this isn't how the system works. If I need to have an appointment, and like you, I haven't seen a GP for some time, and my surgery makes it incredibly difficult if you did want to. So I'm not buying it. And also the expenditure of issuing out smartwatches.
It saves money. It saves money. It's much cheaper than having to go to hospital or a GP every month.
Well, maybe Mr Miggins can sell that to pay for his gas bill this winter instead, because smartwatches are not cheap items, and I'm not convinced that it's a good use of taxpayers' money to just hand them out in the vain hope that some people will take it seriously. It may work for some people. I like the advent of tech coming into healthcare, absolutely do. But I think that on its own, without any backup, is just a disaster waiting to happen.
If the idea was the basic principle of all this, as I said before, is a prevention service, not a sickness service. So the more you can stop people getting very ill, the cheaper it'll be for the health service and the more lives are saved. So one of the ideas at the moment is, which he's borrowed from Australia, is you broaden this out into these neighbourhood health centres, which are kind of one-stop health shops. So what would happen is you'd be able to go in there, you see your doctor, your dentist, your nurse if you needed to. You could do the whole thing in one building. That in itself would save money.
But that's not new.
And it's also more convenient.
You know what? You just actually took the words out of my mouth.
The Conservative Party came up with the idea of having polyclinics, which was going to be the same thing. And I seem to remember...
You took me to one, I seem to remember.
Labour politicians saying this will never work. And I think the large problem is that in some areas that will work really, really well. going out into the countryside, it's going to be really sporadic as to how many people that you can put in these places. Are you going to have a chiropodist? Are you going to have a doctor, a nurse? Whatever it is.
But in principle, would you go along with it, Claire? I mean, the idea
well, yes,
that...
because we came up with the idea previously with polyclinics, and I thought it was a really good idea, rather than having to think, oh, I need the GP, but they're going to send me for a blood test to the hospital. Oh, I need to get to the hospital. Well, that's not massively convenient because I can only go there every second Thursday. It would be great to have stuff in one place. And I seem to recall that the Labour Party were really dismissive of that idea.
Yeah, I don't remember them being dismissive, but at the moment you're rubbishing the idea that you say is actually quite a good one to have.
I'm not rubbishing it at all. I'm just saying it's not a new idea. It's a recycling of something that they dismissed previously.
And it's the practicality of it I'm confused about. It makes a very good headline, but it's like we don't have enough dentists at the moment. We don't have enough GPs. We don't have enough healthcare professionals in pretty much every area. So this sounds good. I agree with both of you. It sounds a great idea to have everything in one place. I seem to remember clinics being slightly like that back in the 60s. But it's where are the staff coming from? We don't have them at the moment.
The whole point about the reorganisation is you'll be taking existing staff and moving them into these neighbourhood health centres.
Right.
There is a plan also to recruit more doctors. So you're talking about 15,000 more students passing through medical school. As we know, that's going to take time because it takes 5 years to get through. But the idea would be that you just make everything run more efficiently, both for the medical staff and for the patient. And I don't know if it'll work absolutely perfectly. You may well be right that in rural areas there may be certain problems, but the principle must be right, and to give them a chance to actually achieve it seems to me like a way forward.
Well, it's a 10-year plan.
It's only
sorry, I've lost your name on here now. Oh, forgive me, but you say 10 years. 10 years! Exclamation mark. Yeah. I don't think they're that happy about waiting 10 years for...
No, well, but it is a long-term thing. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yes, indeed. Right, OK, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and much more, please do go to our website at gbnews.com. Now, another story that is not unlinked to this one. More than 1 in 4 Coventry residents were born outside the UK, and 1 in 7 have arrived since 2011, putting a huge strain on, yes, housing, schools and the NHS in that particular city. Now, the reason this particular city has been chosen is a bit around the Mail on Sunday today. I've done a great report about what it's like for the people there. We all talk about migration till we're blue in the face. Stop the boats, smash the gangs, etc. We all talk about that. But no one actually very rarely goes out and talks to the people in these places, what it's actually like on the ground. And that's what the Mail on Sunday have done today. Claire, I'm going to come to you first on this one. I read this report, absolutely every word of it. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. And it just, Britain's population is growing. It's the fastest it's ever been growing in 75 years. And Coventry's population is one of the fastest growing in the UK. And the pressure on the population is growing, but the services aren't, which is kind of what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is really interesting. And the one thing I found fascinating in that report was there was a gentleman that had come over here from Pakistan some 20 years ago, and he said, look, I came here, I was sponsored by my fiancée, now wife, and I work and I speak English. And why doesn't everybody else? If they want to come over here and they want to be able to contribute, then learn the language. And I thought that actually that was a really interesting way of looking at it, because we all have views on immigration, and, mine is probably slightly more relaxed than some members of the Conservative Party. But I do think there is a problem when you have stretched services. If the services aren't going to increase with any kind of population, whether it be straight British-born or if this is because of migration, if you aren't going to expand services, you are always going to have a problem. I think that we also need to look at why so many people in a certain area, that is always going to cause tension, whether it be community tension, whether it be pressure on services and schools and language services also for those individuals. 40 languages being spoken in one school in particular. Now, that can be a force for good. However, it needs to be backed up with some funding. And I think that we need to look at patterns of migration, look where people are going. I'm not one for completely shutting the doors. I've been really honest about that. But I do think you need to look at where people go, what communities are going to look like, Why are they going to certain places? Now, Coventry is well known as an industrial heartland, and also it has universities. So you've got those kind of pull factors. Why not look at how best we can manage this and not having everybody congregating in one area?
It's about the facilities, certainly in Coventry. I mean, GP surgeries, as we've just been discussing, are under enormous pressure. As many as 3,000 patients per doctor at some. In Coventry, it's 3,000 patients per doctor. The UK average is 2,300. And there's one surgery in Coventry that specialises in treating only asylum seekers and refugees because the demand is so high. I mean, it's you know, and they're building extra satellite housing estates on the outskirts of Coventry without building new infrastructure, no new doctor surgeries, no new schools.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that Claire is absolutely right on this one. The answer there is a bit more redistribution. What you want is that if people are moving into an area, and as you say, it doesn't really matter terribly whether that's immigrants or anybody else, if they overload that area, what you need to do is try and get that, certainly with immigrants, round the country as much as possible. And of course, there's resistance from local authorities about doing that. If you take, for instance, cross-channel migration, that we live in Kent, so we're in the front line of that. Now, Kent takes the majority of unaccompanied children. That overloads the children's services in our county. If other local authorities stepped in and said, oh, OK, we will actually ease the pressure, we'll take some, that would be fine, but they resist it. So it really is going to be down, I think, probably to central government to say, right, we need a different kind of system where we make it a bit fairer for everybody around the country.
Do you have any faith in that happening soon, Claire?
No, I really don't. I think successive governments have actually failed on this, and the Conservative Party doesn't have clean hands either. But I think it's always the failure of governments to understand population increase or decrease and what the services need. And if you're just looking purely at housing, that is always a massive bugbear, is that people see enormous housing estates going up without the road structure, the sewage structure, the schools, the GPs, the bus services, etc., etc. So I think it all plays into a bigger picture. It isn't solely down to migration. It's actually the really poor planning of governments and local authorities to allow for the amount of people that they have in an area.
Yes, indeed. Lots of you getting in touch on this one as well at gbnews.com/your say. Certainly on the NHS line are saying basically it's going to take the Wes Streeting 10 years, is it? Oh, it took them literally 10 days to get rid of a winter fuel allowance for pensioners, didn't it? So if they put their mind to it, they can do it as quick as they want, don't they? Lots of you getting in touch. Just say gbnews.com/your say to get in touch. Please do join the conversation. Now, let's have some good news, shall we? It's a Sunday afternoon. Why not? It's time for the Great British Giveaway, and the clock is ticking on getting your entry in as lines are closing this Friday. Make sure you don't miss out on your chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash. Here's all the details you need. Good luck indeed. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's packed show. The King and Queen have begun their landmark tour of Australia by joining a church congregation for Sunday service. Our royal reporter is there. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you soon.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
We shouldn't have to do this, Rebecca. These men should have been compensated long ago.
They shouldn't have to fight for recognition. And this is what's happened over the last 72 years. So all the way through from the test through to the present day, they've known that something happened to them. They've seen what they've been through, their medical conditions, the fact that many of these servicemen died well before their time. And they were ignored in a way that other countries didn't ignore their similar testing veterans. So other nuclear powers across the world, the US, for example, compensated and recognised their nuclear testing veterans many, many years ago. Yet, unfortunately, successive governments in the UK failed to do that. After the long campaign for medallic recognition, finally, these servicemen received medallic recognition, but it came in a jiffy bag in the post, which is not the way to honour the service that these men gave to our country. there needs to be an understanding and an uncovering of the truth of what they actually went through. They've been fighting for many years for access to their medical records, for example, urine and blood tests that they know were taken during their service. But when many of these families have tried to access their records, these test results seem to be missing, and there's no explanation as to why this has happened.
What basis does the Ministry of Defence say it's not our responsibility?
Well, we know from other studies across the world and subsequent studies, it showed, staggeringly, that these men were exposed to the same amount of radiation as clean-up workers at Chernobyl.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Needham. I hope you're having a lovely Sunday lunchtime out there. Now, the King and Queen have begun their landmark tour of Australia by joining a church congregation for a Sunday service. There was a small protest, but royal fans so far outnumber the people moaning. The King and Queen arrived in Sydney on Friday for their 6-day visit to the Commonwealth nation to celebrate its people, culture and heritage. Royal reporter Cameron Walker has all the latest from Sydney for us.
Welcome home, Your Majesties, just, I think, sums up the mood here in northern Sydney this morning. The King and Queen attended a church service at St Thomas's Church in northern Sydney, meeting the local congregation, but also, of course, meeting the crowds. Over 1,000 people estimated to have been here, braving the heat. Of course, it's summer here in Australia, in order to try and catch a glimpse or even meet their Majesties, the King and Queen, and several were lucky enough to do so. It's clearly a very packed schedule. The King will be off to the New South Wales Parliament, where he'll be attending a reception celebrating the bicentenary of the Legislative Council here in New South Wales. He also has 2 private audiences with the Governor-General of Australia and the Governor of New South Wales, Margaret Beazley, as well. I spoke to some members of the crowd, and here is what they said.
We're very excited for the King and Queen to come.
Very excited.
Let's go.
We basically missed our own service to come and get a glimpse of him, so yeah, it was very exciting.
Seen him as Prince before, first time as King.
I remember him as a young boy at school in Victoria.
I was around when his mother made the first trip to Australia in 1954. I was a little girl at school.
He's done pretty well at age 75 to come all this way.
They represent so much good in the world. I'm a big supporter of the royal. I born in Nepal, live in Australia.
Now, the noise from the crowd was electric when the King and Queen were doing their walkabout, and it certainly drowned out the noise of a small number of protesters, which were also here outside the church to, let's say, greet their Majesties. I'm not sure they would see it that way.
I want to say to King Charles, give my land back. This land was colonised. This land was taken by force of brutality through massacres of First Nations people.
Always was, always will be!
The King is clearly very mindful of the fact that he's been diagnosed with cancer, and his schedule has been designed in such a way to allow him time to rest. That's why there was no engagements carried out yesterday. The engagements kind of stop mid-afternoon today, and then tomorrow he'll be flying on to Canberra with Her Majesty the Queen for several other engagements.
Brilliant. Well, it looks lovely down there. Cameron, I think, is doing a cracking job. And there is only a small protest, Nigel. We were warned that there might be sort of like, you know, we were led to believe that everybody hates the royals and they shouldn't be there and give us Australia back, and we're not seeing too much of that, are we?
No, we're not. And I mean, even the Prime Minister there, Anthony Albanese, he's a Republican. He would eventually like to get rid of the royals, but he sort of parked it into the long grass. I think that the last referendum on this was 1999, when Australians voted 55% to keep the monarch as head of state. And it does bring stability to them. Why upset it? It's a bit like what we're doing over here with the House of Lords. The biggest danger about reform is you destabilise the Constitution. The same thing applies in Australia. And I gather down there at the moment, the biggest protests are actually by a British group, Republic, who've gone down there to protest at the King being there in the first place.
I mean, you sort of got to slightly admire that. They fancied a little bit of a trip to
Well, I was going to say, let's hope they're not Green campaigners at the same time.
Yeah, and most people, when you look at the reports, are really, really happy to see the King and Queen, and it's so nice to see the King out there actually looking well, considering that he had his own health scare not all that long ago, to get on a flight, go down under, go see people, do his job, which is essentially what it is, but he just looks happy. And I think the majority of people are supportive. The kids there, that was really interesting. You sort of look at the children because they're growing up with that around them and they seem very happy to be out there waving flags. And I think it is fantastic. You will always get those who disagree, and that's their right to disagree. But to stand there and shout from the sidelines, well, what is their proposal? So, you know, give us our country back. Well, again, but where's it gone? Who's taking it?
Does it really make that much of a difference, Nigel?
No, it doesn't.
It's just a title thing, is it?
Well, it's a little bit more than that. I mean, you still have... the issue is whether or not Australia should have its own head of state, rather than having the King, who is 12,000 miles away. And you've got a Governor-General there who there's a little bit of resentment to that. But all that seems to be passing slightly on that basic point. Does it really make a huge amount of difference to day-to-day life if we change things? And what it could do is destabilise the system that they have at the moment.
And obviously we've got the Caribbean islands meeting coming up soon, where it's a different kettle of fish again, where you think it might be more antagonistic.
I don't know if it will. I think that we've kind of peaked on that. Everybody knows that there's a conversation about slavery reparations. People will fall on either side of that, and I personally don't think we need to be paying them back. And it is quite interesting that some of the Caribbean islands wanted to be independent, and that's their right, but it is done on the will of those individuals. I don't see that we have to get upset every time the head of state goes over to a Commonwealth country. And there was a poll out recently which is quite interesting to say that the most support for the Commonwealth came from those countries, and it was actually Great Britain who had the worst impression of Britain in the Commonwealth. So when you went over to other countries, they were actually quite happy and quite content. There are those that have got their independence, and that's fantastic, and it was a matter for them.
Why do we hate this country so much at the moment, Nigel? I mean, it's mad. Other people have a much higher opinion of us.
Yeah, I think basically Claire's absolutely right there.
Will you stop agreeing with your wife? You know?
I know.
I'm sure as the afternoon goes on, we won't be.
You're still in the stable tonight, you know that.
I've got my hay waiting for me. That is, obviously, it's a matter for each country to decide whether they want to be independent, whether they want to be a republic, or they gain benefits out of having a king. So they make that decision. The next stage is that the King will face head-on these slavery reparations because he moves on to Samoa and the Commonwealth Heads of Government Conference there. After this, I mean, it's a punishing schedule. He's got 11 days on the road, basically. So he will actually confront that, and certainly the slavery debate then will be quite interesting. We're not going to pay reparations. It's not going to happen. But certainly there'll be demands for it.
Yeah, it would be bankrupting us, wouldn't it? Oh, but we're out of time on that one, unfortunately. I'm Dawn Newsroom, this is GBNews, and there's loads more coming up on the show. But first, it's time for the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you. The top stories this hour. The Health Secretary will promise to turn the NHS into a neighbourhood health service as he launches a major consultation about the institution's next decade. West Streeting is set to invite patients and NHS staff to take part in a national conversation to shape the government's 10-year plan for the health service next week. Millions of people are also set to receive health monitoring smartwatches as part of Labour's plan to save the NHS. While the party pledged to build an NHS fit for the future. Announcing the consultation today, Mr Streeting said if we want to save the things we love about the health service, then we have to change it. The Prime Minister says the whole country is behind Sir Chris Hoy following his terminal cancer diagnosis. Sir Keir Starmer posted on X saying such sad news. Chris is a British sporting legend. To face his diagnosis with such positivity is inspiring. The 48-year-old's been given a diagnosis and has 2 to 4 years left to live. Sir Chris told the Sunday Times, as unnatural as it feels, this is nature. He also told the newspaper he's known for a year that his cancer is terminal. In February, as he was undergoing treatment, including chemotherapy, Sir Chris said he felt forced to reveal his cancer diagnosis publicly. He's the third most decorated British Olympian of all time, with 6 career golds and a silver medal. King Charles and Queen Camilla joined a church congregation in Sydney for a Sunday service on the first day of engagement during their tour of Australia. It's the King's first visit to Australia since he became monarch in September 2 years ago. It's also the biggest trip the King's made since starting cancer treatment in February. Their 6-day visit to the Commonwealth country will involve celebrating the nation's people, culture and heritage. And fans in the UK and around the world are holding vigils this weekend in memory of Liam Payne, the One Direction star who died on Wednesday. A memorial event is due to take place in London's Hyde Park from 2 p.m, with fans encouraged to bring letters, drawings and flowers. Bandmate Zayn Malik announced he'll reschedule his US tour after the heartbreaking news of that death. And Liam's sister also paid tribute to her late brother. Liam's father visited the Casa Sur Hotel in Argentina yesterday, where his son died. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. I just want to read this message out very quickly. This is from Misunderstood, talking about our debate earlier on about the Royals Down Under. She goes, I love my country. What I don't love is what the politicians have turned it into. Interpret that how you want. Yes, I think we know what you're talking about. OK, remember, you can get involved as well, like Misunderstood. Interesting name there. It's very simple to get involved in all the stories we're talking about today by going to gbnews.com/yoursay and join in our conversation. Talk about whatever you want. Free country at the moment. Now, lots more coming up on today's show. A new generation of trainee teachers say lessons on colonialism, slavery and the lasting impact of imperialism should be taught to kids as young as 5. OK, all of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Newsroom. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you soon.
Good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, it's been a wet and windy start out there, all to do with Storm Ashley, bringing some very strong winds, especially to northwestern parts through today. And this is that deep area of low pressure named Storm Ashley. And you can see a real squeeze in those ice bars, indicating some strong and gusty winds. There are Met Office warnings in force, an amber one. We could see gusts of 70, possibly 80 miles per hour, especially through this afternoon. Outbreaks of rain then continuing to push their way eastwards, drier behind across parts of Wales and the southeast of England, but blustery showers across Northern Ireland and Scotland. Otherwise staying rather mild, highs of possibly 17 or 18 degrees. So as we go through Sunday afternoon and into evening time, further spells of rain coming into Scotland. Again, we still have that amber wind warning in force, and that's also coincided with some high spring tides, so could lead to some disruption here. Further outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland as well. Again, some strong gusty winds coming up from the south and west. Otherwise, across Wales and southwestern parts of England, drier here with some cloud across the far southeast. So through Sunday evening and overnight, cloud and rain continuing to push their way north and eastwards, with the strongest winds then pushing their way eastwards across Orkney and Shetland. Still staying blustery, but further towards the south, largely cloudy and staying rather mild too, with temperatures up at around 11 or 12 degrees. So blustery still across the north through Monday morning, with showers moving through quickly. Further towards the south across Wales and southern parts of England, hazy sunshine, largely dry, but we may see some outbreaks of rain across the Channel Islands and towards the far southeast of England as we go through Monday. Otherwise, lighter winds here, but temperatures a touch down. Bye-bye.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Newsroom. Hope you're having a lovely Sunday afternoon out there. We've been having a chit-chat around the table about going back to our school days and how we used to enjoy colouring the maps in red. But you can't do that anymore. No, you can't. A new generation of trainee teachers is advocating for the inclusion of lessons on colonialism, slavery and the lasting impact of imperialism for children. 5-year-olds. I mean, come on. Most of them can't even write their own name. A survey shows that 97% support moving away from a Western-centric focus in primary history, traditionally centred on topics like the Egyptians and the ancient Romans, to include perspectives of historically oppressed groups. I don't even understand the words I'm reading out. How are 5-year-olds meant to deal with this? Critics warn this could oversimplify complex issues and indoctrinate children, while supporters argue it's essential to challenge Eurocentric biases in education. Nigel Nelson, 5-year-olds, Eurocentric biases in education.
I don't think that would be a lesson. No, I mean, there's no way a 5-year-old's going to be able to cope with that.
I'm struggling.
But the
slightly over
so
5.
if you take away the jargon out of this, and there's far too much of the
there was a lot of jargon in the report
of the teacher jargon. I'm not against the idea of actually teaching kids about, as young as 5 is fine, something about, for instance, slavery. Reason being is, certainly they can learn about the Egyptians, the Romans, that's great. The reason I think that something like slavery is maybe important to teach is because we're talking about it now. We've just been talking about the reparations that Caribbean countries are demanding. Some of those children will have a heritage going back to those countries. They're bound to actually want to be asking questions about it. So provided this is taught in a way that is not biased, that it's not saying there are goodies and there are baddies, making everything terribly simplistic. If you're actually
you have to be simplistic with 5-year-olds,
well,
surely.
OK, but not on the goodies and baddies front, that you teach the whole thing dispassionately and say, yes, this is what we did with slavery. We can be proud of the fact that we abolished it. Nice picture of William Wilberforce to say, there's the man who did it. You can actually do that with young children and make them understand that.
Claire, you are actually a governor in a primary school, aren't you? Yeah. Can you do this with young children?
I don't think so. The whole point of the history education in primary schools is to instill a love of learning. And it's really interesting. I've spoken to the head of history at the primary school, absolutely enthusiastic to the nth degree. And they teach things like ancient Rome, they teach the Egyptians. And do you know what? The best lesson, the one that everybody loves and will always remember, the Great Fire of London.
It's great. It's got everything.
It inspires.
I bet they like the Great Plague too.
Oh, can you imagine? You imagine your history. No, your kind of curriculum would not go down well.
What's about horrible histories? One of the most successful ways of teaching little kids history.
And you're meant to instil a love of learning. You're meant to instil some knowledge. The curriculum, you can't include everything. 5-year-olds, for a start, need to be able to learn how to read and how to write, how to get along with each other.
And those should be the priorities. They must be the priorities.
But you introduce history in a way that they will understand, in a way that they will enjoy, because if you enjoy something, you will want to learn more. We've all been in those lessons where we absolutely hated it. Maths was one of those for me.
Oh, yes.
I was really bad.
But if you leave slavery to sort of Black History Month or something like that, which is where it often ends up being taught, I remember doing it myself. I mean, in a primary school, and when I was doing teaching Black history, I've never been a teacher, but I was probably the wrong person.
You were worried.
I was a helpful parent.
It's a relief to the world, isn't it?
And I rather thought that actually putting that into Black History Month was the wrong place for it. It seemed to me that should have been broadened out to the curriculum elsewhere.
But where do you stop? I mean, you're picking up issues that are apparent today. Fine, we'll talk about slavery reparations. But what about looking at the Middle East? Are you then going to look at teaching about the Ottoman Empire to a bunch of school children? Where do you stop? History is a massive, massive subject. You need to be able to bring it down to some real basics to give people the foundations of knowledge within a subject. And as they go into secondary school, and if they study it for GCSE or A-level, then you start to widen out the discussions that you have. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't discuss these things. You don't need to have it on a curriculum to be taught to children. You can have this as part of general conversations within schools if they feel it is necessary. But I really think that you can't monkey around with a curriculum just so it fits the narrative of the moment. Children need a broad education, they need a broad understanding, but more often than not, some of the softer skills is actually much more in need. You need to teach them how to get along with each other. You need to teach
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, it's a question of priorities there. But the idea of teaching history from a young age and doing it in a way that is absolutely neutral. You're not saying, you're not asking people, and this is the other thing that's been coming up, to be proud of your history. You're just saying, this is your history, folks, and make of it what you will.
Is it a grumpy granddad? Hello again, Grumpy, but you do message a lot and we love you. Grumpy granddad says, it seems like kids are being taught to be ashamed of our nation's past.
Well, no. I mean, you shouldn't be ashamed of it either, although there are bits you might be ashamed of. I mean, for instance, you can't be proud of the fact that Henry VIII beheaded a couple of wives, or that his daughter burnt a load of Protestants at the stake. Those aren't things to be proud of. You can be proud of the way we stood up to Hitler during the Second World War, and perhaps Napoleon you could be proud of.
And abolish slavery while we're at it.
And abolish slavery, absolutely. So on those kind of things, what you're saying is teach the kids the history, do it as simply as you like, or as they grow up, as complicated as you like, but don't try and instill some idea that either you're ashamed of it or you're proud of it.
I've just said thank you. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but Dickie, I've just got to read your message out. Dickie says, for Pete's sake, let 5-year-olds draw things like dinosaurs. Yeah. They can start with Nigel Nelson and the Labour cabinet. Harsh.
Well, thank you.
Harsh. If you'd like to join in this conversation, please do get in touch. It's gbnews.com/your say, and you can be nice about Nigel as well. I feel a bit mean now. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. A memorial event is taking place in Hyde Park today to commemorate former One Direction singer Liam Payne, who died after falling off a balcony in Argentina earlier this week. We'll be there live to bring you up to date on that. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. See you soon.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tell us about this film, because it's obviously come from your own experiences.
We wanted to create something for the entertainment industry that wasn't just another kind of dull documentary. I mean, some of them are brilliant, they're very informative, but you kind of leave a bit bewildered and a little bit kind of flat. So we thought, I've got a passion for writing and you've obviously got an unbounded knowledge on the subject. Why don't we create a film with a kind of satirical look on eating disorders?
So this came it's been made 20 years after your own...
It is 20 years.
20 years,
practically to the day.
So Samantha, you suffered with OCD and an eating disorder as well?
Yes.
And that's when your mum became a counsellor, is that right?
A little bit later on, I think we spent a bit of time in the system and I realised that it wasn't working for us. So I took it on myself to learn as much as I could about the subject.
I call it a tragedy, probably the wrong word, but suffering.
No, it is a tragedy because mental ill health and eating disorders destroy the lives of not only the sufferers but their families as well.
But you've turned that into something so positive and so
It's
inspiring.
amazing, really, that 20 years ago our story was just beginning, and 20 years on, what we've done. But I have to say that very little has changed in the system.
I've heard that.
And I think that's what we're passionate about.
Yeah, so...
That was why we wanted to... I mean, I work with families every day and I see the destruction that eating disorders and other mental illnesses not just bring to the sufferer but the whole family.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really passions me because obviously 20 years ago we were there. And I just feel that so much more needs to be done. And I think with eating disorders, there is still a lot of misunderstanding around the subject.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised. I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to The Weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Now, a memorial event is taking place in Hyde Park today to commemorate former One Direction singer Liam Payne, who died after falling from a balcony in Argentina this week. Let's go live to Hyde Park and speak to GB News reporter Jack Carson.
Yeah, well, good afternoon to you. We're here in Hyde Park at the Peter Pan statue where hundreds of One Direction fans have gathered here to pay tribute to Liam Payne, who, of course, fell from that balcony in Buenos Aires earlier this week. Memorial events have been held all around the country, all around the world over the last few days, and hundreds have gathered here. As you can see, flowers, balloons that have been left as well, special messages of people's own personal memories of maybe meeting Liam, of the impact that One Direction's music, Liam Payne's music, has had on their lives. There's a lot of emotion here as people also write their own personal messages around this statue. Many of the crowd, as you may be able to hear in the background, also breaking into start singing some of One Direction's fans as they start to grieve, who a lot of people have told me that I've spoken to here. It feels like one of their friends, one of their family, such as the connection of his music with them growing up and into adulthood as well as they face the challenges that all of us face in our lives. But let's talk to One Direction fan who's come here today. Chloe, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I mean, what is it like being here? How are you feeling being here at this memorial today?
It feels like very shocking because I would have thought that I would have to do this in my 70s when I grow up. So to like be younger than him when we have to do this, it feels very it doesn't feel real in a sense.
I mean, what has One Direction's music, what has Liam Payne's music meant to you?
It's meant so much to me. Like, I was only born in 2009 and they formed in 2010. In like my whole life since then, and it's like they've saved me like when no one else did and stuff, so it means a lot.
I mean, what is it like being here for this memorial? I mean, what have you done in terms of your own tributes that we can see all around us here today?
I made bracelets. I made 2 bracelets. Me and my sister, we printed out some photos and stuff, and we brought out some flowers as well.
Yeah, and you're a big One Direction fan. You've just said there how much of an impact, you know, their music has had on you, and I guess that now turns to remembering Liam in that way whenever you listen to his music now.
Yeah, it feels like that there's like a piece of my childhood that's just now like gone, and that can't come back, because obviously if One Direction do reunite, it won't feel the same as if it was the 5 Ps, so it just feels like very numb.
Well, Chloe, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. That's just a view of one fan here that's gathered for the memorial, but there are hundreds around as many come to lay flowers, light candles and write their tributes to Liam Payne.
Thank you very much, Jack. Incredibly moving there, and very interesting to hear what some of those young girls had to say. I mean, Liam was only 31. He found fame at 16, fatherhood at 23. And it just seems, we've seen it so many times in rock and roll in particular, haven't we? That, you know, the infamous 27 Club. It just really is a sad thing. And I think while part of me was thinking, I'm not sure about this memorial, you listen to those young girls talking, you think they need to do this. They're expressing how they feel about a very tragic story. OK, I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News. There's loads more coming up on today's show. But first, as you've just seen from that report from Hyde Park, the weather isn't great. Let's see what it's like where you are with Catherine.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We've got Storm Ashley crossing the UK today, bringing some very strong winds, especially towards the northwest, with the rain gradually clearing towards the south. This is that area of low pressure named Storm Ashley. You can see a real squeeze in those isobars, indicating some strong and gusty winds. We've got an amber warning in force, gusts of up to 70, possibly even 80 miles per hour, with outbreaks of showery rain through this evening and overnight. Drier towards the south, across Wales and southern parts of England, with lighter winds here as well. Otherwise staying rather mild tonight, generally lows 10 or 11 degrees. So as we start Monday morning, it is still going to be windy, especially across Scotland and towards Orkney and Shetland. Again, gusts 50 to 60, possibly even 70 miles per hour. There will be some brightness to start the day across eastern areas, though, through Monday morning, but showers already moving through across parts of western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Towards England and Wales, though, it is going to be largely cloudy, especially the far southeast you go, perhaps even with some outbreaks of rain to start Monday morning across the Channel Islands. So as we go through Monday morning and into the afternoon, blustery showers continuing across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Towards England and Wales, though, largely dry, some hazy sunshine, cloudier towards the far southeast, where we may just see some heavy spells of rain. But there will be lighter winds out there compared to Sunday. Temperatures a little bit cooler at around 15 or 16 degrees. So through Monday evening, showers continuing across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Towards the south, though, largely dry with clear skies as we go into Tuesday. But Tuesday leaves sunny spells, scattered showers, a little bit drier on Wednesday before turning a bit unsettled later in the week.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Days, good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, there you are. Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock on Sunday, the 20th of October. I've no idea where October's going either. It's ridiculous, isn't it? This is the weekend on GB News. I hope you're having a lovely Sunday lunchtime out there. Now, the government says they are cracking down on benefit fraud again. Those who cheat the system could have their bank accounts raided by Number 10 in a bid to clamp down on welfare fraud. Can they do what so many previous governments have failed to do? And councils are increasingly replacing parking meters with smartphone payment apps to reduce costs. But is this just abandoning the older generation? Spoiler alert, yes. I'm Dawn Neeson, I am the older generation, and this is the weekend on GB News. But this show is nothing without you and your views. Loads of you have been getting in touch. Some of you are even saying nice things about our panellist, Nigel Nelson there. I think I've lost your name, but you say he was one of the nicer dinosaurs connected to the Labour Party. He was very pleased. I think your name was Rosie. In any case, keep your views coming in at gbnews.com/yoursay. About anything we're talking about, what you want to chat about, anything. It's your show, all about you. Just join our conversation. You know how now. As you've just heard me say, keeping me company is the wonderful husband and wife team. For now, give it another hour or so. GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, who is lovely, by the way, and former Conservative Special Advisor Claire Pearson, who is very patient, by the way. But before we get straight into today's stories, let's get those news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you very much. The top stories. The Health Secretary will promise to turn the NHS into a neighbourhood health service as he launches a major consultation about the institution's next decade. Wes Streeting is set to invite patients and NHS staff to take part in a national conversation to shape the government's 10-year plan for the service next week. Millions of people are also set to receive health monitoring smartwatches as part of Labour's plan to save the NHS. The parties pledged to build an NHS fit for the future. Announcing the consultation today, Mr Streeting said if we want to save the things we love about the NHS, then we have to change it.
There will be a big focus in the budget around the investment in things like capital and tech so that we can make the system more efficient. But even where we're doing things like the 40,000 more appointments every week, that will also be achieved through reformed ways of working so we get more bang for the buck because, you know, people are feeling the pinch in their pockets at the moment.
Elsewhere, those cheating the benefit system could have their bank accounts raided by the Department for Work and Pensions. Private companies like airlines will also be forced to hand over information under new plans being drawn up by ministers, according to the Sunday Telegraph. The crackdown is set to be launched as part of Rachel Reeves' first budget, with the total savings set to be £1.6 billion over the course of the Parliament. Some have criticised the announcement for being too intrusive, but the Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall says it's absurd that the current measures have become so outdated. Official figures show the total cost of fraud to the economy last year was a record £7.3 billion. Now, fans in the UK and around the world are holding vigils this weekend in memory of Liam Payne, the One Direction star who died on Wednesday. Fans are gathering at a memorial event at London's Hyde Park today to pay their respects to the 31-year-old. They've been encouraged to bring letters, drawings and flowers. Bandmate Zayn Malik announced he'll reschedule his US tour after the heartbreaking death. Liam's sister also paid tribute to her late brother. Liam's father visited the Casa Sur hotel in Argentina yesterday, where his son died after falling from a third-floor balcony. In other news, the Prime Minister says the whole country is behind Sir Chris Hoy following his terminal cancer diagnosis. Sir Keir Starmer posted on X saying such sad news. Chris is a British sporting legend. To face his diagnosis with such positivity is inspiring. The 48-year-old's been given a diagnosis and has 2 to 4 years left to live. Sir Chris told the Sunday Times, as unnatural as it feels, this is nature. He also told the newspaper he's known for a year that his cancer is terminal. In February, as he was undergoing treatment, including chemotherapy, Sir Chris said he felt forced to reveal his cancer diagnosis publicly. He's the third most decorated British Olympian of all time, with 6 career golds and 1 silver medal. King Charles and Queen Camilla joined a church congregation in Sydney today for a Sunday service on the first day of engagement during their tour of Australia. It's the King's first visit to Australia since he became monarch in September 2 years ago. It's also the biggest trip the King has made since starting cancer treatment in February. Their 6-day visit to the Commonwealth country will involve celebrating the nation's people, culture and heritage. Well, following the church service today, some young children who'd engaged with the royal couple spoke of their experience.
She asked me where we did Sunday school.
What did she say?
Over there.
Anyone else speak?
Yeah, he was asking us if we knew what the Bible was and if we studied it and if we had tests on it.
Wow. Anybody else?
She asked something. She asked about the congregation or something.
And what was it like to meet the King and Queen?
Really?
And Moldovans head to the polls today to vote for both the presidential election and an EU referendum. The vote could decide whether the country moves closer to Europe or back towards Russia. Moldova applied to join the bloc after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
Oh, thank you very much, Tatiana. And now, OK, this is a great story, isn't it? The Department for Work and Pensions is set to gain new powers to directly access the bank accounts and wages of suspected benefit fraudsters. That could be you, by the way. They could suspect you of it and just have the shifty around your bank account. It's part of a major government crackdown on welfare fraud. Liz Kendall, Work and Pensions Secretary, has unveiled plans to update the department's outdated investigatory tactics, which have remained unchanged for 2 decades. The government claimed they aim to save £1.6 billion over the next 5 years through these enhanced powers. OK, well, Claire and Nigel are still here with me. Claire, now this was originally suggested by the Conservative Party, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. It was a great fanfare that benefits claimants would be allowed to go and look in their bank accounts, see if they were claiming fraudulently. And the Labour Party decided
what reaction did they have to that then?
Very, very bad thing, that Tories were evil and they were picking on the vulnerable. And here we are, later in 2024, where the Labour government thinks it's a stonkingly good idea. Now, I don't think anybody would have a problem if somebody is claiming fraudulently that money is taken back. No one has an issue with that. However, do we remember that there was a problem with people's child tax credits when they looked into their tax credit claims and they found that they weren't a lone parent because there was somebody else at the address? And when you looked at it properly, you could see that they rented a property. And, of course, the person who owned it was a landlord or, indeed, landlady. And that name was being used as showing that this person was fraudulent because they were living with someone else, without taking into account that if you rent a property, somebody has to own it, and therefore their name will be on the land registry. So I don't trust governments as a whole to get this right. I don't really think that they have any place roaming around bank accounts. I mean, mine, they'd be very, very bored. There's an awful lot of money that goes out to South Eastern Railway.
Yeah, mine's not exactly exciting, it has to be said.
You know, or the local shop.
Yeah.
That's about it. But, I mean, I think you have to look at fraud. The amounts of fraud is ridiculous and the amount that they claim back from people is negligible. But equally, you could bring out the same rules for something like the CSA for when the parent without care doesn't pay. How about you're able to go and raid their bank account for what they should pay for their child?
That would be part of it. I mean,
it's not part of it, though. That's the whole
Or
point.
it'd be a separate thing. But it's something that, absolutely right, get those people. What they're talking about here is modernising a system. So at the moment, you have a very strange sort of way of dealing with benefit fraudsters. They write them a letter and then see if they reply so they can gather some evidence. Now, the idea of this is to speed up the process rather than just ending up in court. There's also, I remember doing a story about benefit fraud. I went out on a benefit fraud raid with the DWP, and it was 5 in the morning, got loads of police around, everyone was briefed, it was a major operation, went to this bloke's house and he wasn't in. So one of the guys phoned him up and you sort of thought, what was the point of all that if they could have phoned him up anyway and say, well, where are you?
I'm a bit confused, though. I mean, I completely understand the point of, writing letters. It's a bit... But why was it a bad idea when the Conservatives were going to go and do it, but now it's a good idea?
Well, I mean, it rather depends how this works. I'm not sure that Labour thought the whole thing was a bad idea. What you don't want to do is actually hit vulnerable people and also about making mistakes. So the important thing about this system would be that you would have an independent body to judge appeals. So if you were having your bank account raided, you could say, hang on a sec, you're taking my money, don't do that. You go to the independent adjudicator who says it's right or wrong. What this will do, especially for organised crime, who are nicking millions from the benefit budget, what this would do is enable them to actually get that money back in the same way that you get proceeds of crime back.
Yeah, currently, the government can compel financial institutions, utilities, employers to hand over evidence. But under this new proposed law, which is going to be the Fraud, Error and Debt Bill, it can be extended to all private companies, meaning your movements can be tracked via international flights if you're buying a flight ticket.
Yeah, and that's where I object to it.
But that's how organised criminals move around.
Yeah, but
it's
ordinary
not
people go on holiday as well.
It's going to be somebody like us on our summer holiday, and they're going to be like, all right, this is where she's going, this is where she's spending her money, this is where she's... Why should the state have...
But hang on, you're assuming they're going to start peering at everything that you're doing, or I'm doing, or we're doing.
They're going to allow access to private companies. Now, that is not going to be good.
Access doesn't mean that they're going to start snooping on everybody. What you're talking about here is people who are defrauding the system of big amounts of money.
You think a private company is going to be allowed to have access and they're not going to use it? You think that they're not going to have a little punk around and see what they can find? I'm sorry. Whenever you look at something on social media and you look at a certain brand or whatever, and then all of your adverts for the next year and a half.
Yeah, that is scary.
And that is going to be the same effect, taking it in all seriousness.
Having worked in government, you're very cynical about it, aren't you?
Yes, because you've worked in government.
Come on, even I knew the answer to that one.
Nicely done, though. Well done.
Thank you. It was, yeah, thank you very much. But it's a cracking one, that. But let me know what you think. gbnews.com/you'll say, do you want the government poking around on whether you booked a flight in your bank account? Do you? I mean, it's getting to the stage where you're just going to take the money out and put it under the bed, isn't it? For all the best analysis and opinion on that story, please do go to our website, gbnews.com. Another cracking story for you. Kemi Badenoch has snapped back at a Tory backbencher who claimed she was too preoccupied with her children to be party leader. The Tory leadership hopeful slapped down Sir Christopher Chope's comments, claiming that parenting is a two-person job, and credits her own supportive family for her success, going on to say it should be acceptable to talk about absent fathers as a serious issue. Nigel, I'm going to come to you first on this one, because, Christopher Chope during the week said that basically Kemi wouldn't probably be the best leader for the Conservative Party because she's got small children, completely ignoring the fact that her rival, Robert Jenrick, also has small children, but he's obviously a man. What do you make of what Kemi said today in her interview?
Well, I think that, she's right for a start. I mean, it is quite clearly that the job of parenting is for both parents. It should be. When it came to Christopher Chope, and if people are calling me a dinosaur, I mean, what do you say about Christopher Chope? Yes, well, anyway.
You're quite a cute dinosaur, according to some people.
So, I mean, Christopher Chope, I could see how his mind was working, arguing on the basis of, if you're tied up with your children, you therefore can't be party leader because you won't have time. It's just that he shouldn't have said it. And it is not... it is just not reasonable in the modern world to imagine that women can't do a job as well as men, whatever the responsibilities of the family are, and that should be shared both ways.
But also, Kemi's also opened another hornet's nest for herself here by saying it's a two-parent job, which will automatically alienate single parents.
Yeah. And I was one for 9 years.
Yes,
and you do have that attitude that you are wrong, that you shouldn't be able to do this, and you have people that say you should be looking after your own child and not putting him in nursery. But equally, if I'd then not worked and had to claim benefits, I would have been put down as one of those single parents on benefits. And unfortunately, it's always against the women. Everybody talks about single mothers, and this is where I rarely agree with Kemi, but I did on this when she said everybody looks at the world through the focus of single mums. Well, what about asking where are the dads? And I think it's a really valid point, and we do need to have a proper conversation about how mainly men can just walk away from a family unit and not take any interest in their own child or contribute to their upbringing in any way.
That's what the CSO was meant to be about, wasn't it? In fact, you're not brought that in.
Yeah, and it sort of does it, but not. There are so many things it could do better. The CSA is really flawed. But I think it was wrong of Sir Christopher to even bring it up when you are comparing one person with 3 children to another person with 3 children, but you only really concentrate on one candidate because they're female. It beggars belief that attitude is still there.
Going to the principle of it, the principle must be right. It's better for a child to be brought up by 2 parents if that's possible. That's not to demonise single mothers or single fathers.
But then why didn't he say that a candidate needs to be able to put their full attention? Why did he pick on Kemi for having young children when the other candidate, Robert, has 3 children?
And used them for his election literature, which was absolutely appalling, on the basis that breaches their privacy for the future.
He didn't say it in the broad brush of a leader of an opposition, and it's quite ignoring the fact that David Cameron had young children when he was in Downing Street. Tony Blair
did.
And Cherie Blair introduced another child when they were in Downing Street. They had children already and then little baby came along. But nothing was said about that because they were men. So it was just assumed that the women would take care of them. And why not turn it around and say, well, why, if Kemi has a supportive husband and family unit, which clearly she does, shouldn't be any different to Robert Jenrick's setup with his wife and his supportive family.
Kemi does say in this interview, my spouse is making a sacrifice for me to do the job that I love. So he is, keeping the home fires burning. But it's like, I think we can't avoid the fact, and I think Sir Christopher Chope, I mean, he was very clumsy in what he was saying, but he does have a point. It is very difficult for women because whether we like it or not, we do bear the brunt of child rearing and childcare.
Yeah, we do. If your child is ill at school, the first person they call is the mum.
Yeah.
Guaranteed every single time, and you have to go running. And that's fine. you kind of accept it. You shouldn't have to, but the whole debate about can women have everything, and the answer, no.
I don't.
You can't. And that's a really hard lesson to learn.
Yes.
And I'm a great believer in women going out there and doing whatever they can and whatever they wish. But realistically, you can't have it all. This is really, really hard. Sacrifices have to be made.
Just quickly, Nigel, women can't have it all, but men still can have it all.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
And I do think it's true, and I think it's terribly unfair. And I don't know quite what you do about that. And the only way is that women have to keep trying and plugging away to overcome what is effectively a glass ceiling.
Yeah, which is what Kemi's doing, and you support Kemi fully, obviously.
Well, on this one issue I do, but I will not be voting for her or indeed Robert Jenrick.
You won't be voting for anyone.
Thank you very much. I'm Dawn Newsroom, and this is GB News. And there's loads more coming up on today's show. It's absolutely packed. There's an increasing concern that young Brits are leaving the UK. Join me later to find out why. All of that and much more to come with GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you soon.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Founded in 1990 in Knightsbridge in London, the Beverly Hills Bakery offers some of the finest American baked goods in the United Kingdom. Beverly Hills Bakery has delivered gifts to all the UK Prime Ministers of the last 20 years, with, I think, the exception of Sir Keir Starmer so far, and provided gifts for the royal family and for royal births. As we near the 35th anniversary of the bakery, I'm joined by the owner and head pastry chef, Rosa de Souza, and Manuel de Souza, who is the director of the Beverly Hills Bakery. How marvellous to see you both. Welcome to GB News.
Thank you for inviting us.
So, why has this formula worked? Why did London need a Beverly Hills Bakery?
What we do is we're a bakery, but underlying it's actually a gifting experience.
Right.
So this is an alternative to flowers. So in terms of concept, that has maintained its originality despite going on for 35 years. And in fact, what I do is I often ask myself, why is it going strong? To remind myself to focus on those things that we need to focus on.
So instead of sending a bunch of flowers, you send a beautiful box of cakes like that, or confection like that, complete with bunnies and so on.
Exactly. So you have the concept on the one hand, but you also need the quality of product that goes inside. And I think that's where Beverly Hills Bakery has got a great product.
And it's where Rosa comes in, isn't it?
Yes.
So when did you start to bake? Did you start to bake domestically in your home, and did it spread from there?
We started from home. My mother's baking, where we didn't have all the stoves and things like that. We baked on the charcoal, like the grease.
Yes.
And we started baking. I learned from my mother the baking.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about.
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. This is The Weekend with me, Dawn Newsroom. I hope you're having a lovely, relaxing Sunday afternoon out there. Now, there's an increasing concern that young Brits are leaving the UK for places like Portugal, who are offering younger people a decade of tax breaks that would see them paying nothing at all in their first year of work. Under the scheme, young people earning up to €28,000 a year would have 100% tax exemption in the first year of their job. Do we need to do something in the UK to tackle this imminent demographic nightmare that we have? We have more young people leaving the UK. to go somewhere like Portugal where they're getting tax breaks and, let's be honest, the weather is better. Claire, what do you make in this story? I mean, Britain is gloomy, poor and highly taxed is the general consensus of our 16 to 24-year-olds who are thinking it's better to go elsewhere.
No, I think some of that is true. I mean, you look at the weather and it's not very appealing to stay here. It always seems very dark and gloomy. But I also think that the advent of travel becoming a lot cheaper, people's horizons are broadened. A lot of secondary schools or indeed universities have schools in other countries that they're linked with. So they get to meet people. They may do an exchange trip. And I don't think it's a bad thing for our young people to want to go and travel and to want to go and work somewhere and learn some other skills. I really don't see this as a massive problem. But what we have to do is make sure that when they return, that there is something for them to return to. And a highly stressed, highly taxed workplace isn't going to cut it. If they can't afford to rent a house, they definitely can't afford to buy a house of any way, shape or form. What is there for them? And I think that we do need to rebalance this a little bit. I don't think there's anything wrong with going off and getting some experience. But realistically, what have you got here?
Nigel, we are an ageing...
Yes,
an ageing population, she says, looking pointedly at you. We are an ageing population, and, 30% of 18 to 24-year-olds want to move abroad and not come back.
That's the problem. I mean, it's a global problem. So, and you're absolutely right that the population, the 15 to 64-year-olds, they've been going up, and now we're coming to a halt, and they'll actually go down. In China, because of their one-child policy, they've got a billion working people at the moment, but they're going down to 300 million. Now, how do they look after their ageing population? We suffer the same thing in Britain. It's 3.5 workers look after each pensioner in the sense that they're paying their taxes to pay those pensions. By 2030, we're down to 2.5. By 2070, 2 workers for every pensioner. That is not sustainable. So either the birth rate's got to go up and you can't force people to have babies, or we have to find a way of making sure people don't leave the country for somewhere else.
OK, this is... Labour has been part of the same survey. Labour has been accused of talking down Britain, ignoring strong growth at the start of the year, falling inflation and the low employment rate to focus on the gloom. And this, as a consequence of this, the number of young Brits are looking to buy property abroad has shot up by 420% in the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I don't think that young people are hanging on the every word of the Labour government, or indeed a Conservative government. I just don't think they are. What they're seeing is the rent in their area, if they wanted to get a flat, how much was it going to be? And they couldn't afford to have it on their own.
I mean, this started...
I'm not sure that they're really listening to the politicians. I mean, I can blame politicians for a whole host of different things. But actually, in this respect, this is just their personal experience, which is much more evident than listening to a bunch of politicians in Westminster.
I mean, you would have thought, though, Nigel, wouldn't you? I mean, sort of like, the Tories, it was miserable and, they weren't covering themselves in glory. But with the bounce of Labour and certainly, helping younger people get on the housing ladder, etc., building more homes, etc., it would be more of a feel-good factor for youngsters, but it doesn't seem to be making any difference.
I think we're too early at the moment. And, of course, we've got that big thing coming up called the budget, which we know is going to be a bit gloomy. So I think that we have to look at everything sort of post-budget and almost to be having this conversation in a year's time to see what has been put in place by then, especially with housing that you mentioned, that would encourage young people to A, feel better about themselves, better about their future, and most importantly, better about their future in Britain.
But there's also the small point of how much debt young people will come out of university with. I mean, the majority of people will never get to pay that debt back. And my own son has said to me that he would rather go off and do an apprenticeship, which I fully support, because he doesn't want to be landed with a whole load of debt at the end of a 3-year course. And that's a really big thing. At 16 years old, he's thinking, well, if I go to university and do a 3-year degree, I'm going to have about 50 grand's worth of debt. Whereas in the past, we didn't have that worry. So I think that we need to do something to encourage young people to want to stay here for a start and contribute to the economy in the country they grew up in.
Lots of you getting in touch about this one at gbnews.com/your say. Paul says, I'm a little long in the tooth to leave the country, but I tell my 2 daughters to look into it. I also tell them to urge their children to look long-term, as this country in 20 years will be one of anarchy and people will be very scared to go out on the street. And lots of people are saying similar things. That you know, we try on GB News to sort of like, you know, talk up the country and say, yeah, it's not all bad. We shouldn't paint it as bad. But lots of people are depressed about the future we have, Nigel.
Yeah, I think that's really sad. I mean, I think that the future is quite bright. And as far as Britain goes, Britain is a mostly good country. There are things that are wrong with it, and we debate those things here endlessly, which is quite right. But it doesn't mean that it's not a good place to live. And I think one of the tests is going to be, in fact, again, we're back to the budget, when the non-doms are taxed, will they really leave Britain, or will they actually say, look, we want to stay here because... no, they won't leave Britain.
Really? You think?
These are rich people who can afford...
You guarantee that? Is that a promise?
I can't guarantee it, but there's no evidence at the moment that they are. A lot of people are talking about it to try and avoid the tax. But...
Exactly. They want to see how bad the budget is going to be for those creators of wealth, because that's who the Labour government dislikes the most.
Right, the non-dom thing. Yeah, haven't Labour admitted that they're not going to make as much money out of the non-dom?
Well, we don't know, because we don't know how many are going to leave.
OK, right, we have to move on, unfortunately. A memorial event is taking place in Hyde Park today to commemorate former One Direction singer Liam Payne, who fell off a balcony in Argentina earlier this week. These are the live pictures where that vigil is taking place. Golly gosh, there's an awful lot of people there. That is around the Peter Pan statue in Hyde Park. And if you're listening on the radio, there's a group of young girls, teenage girls, many with balloons and flowers and posters of Liam on the actual statue. There's a lot of young girls and some young boys there, Claire. I'm surprised. I don't know why I'm surprised, because obviously it's not my generation, but an awful lot of young women, they're very, very upset by what's happened this week.
They've grown up with One Direction. They've grown up with Liam Payne, and for some, it may well be their first sort of entry into grief and losing somebody. And we might sit here and say, well, it's a pop star, you didn't know them, but I think they did. They watched him on the sort of talent show, the reality show that he began with. They watched the band grow in fame. They've probably been to concerts. They've read about them. They've seen all this stuff on social media. They feel like that is a part of their life. They feel like it's a friend. And they are experiencing the sort of that horrible loneliness of grief when you do lose somebody. And I don't think that we should judge them for it. I think it's quite lovely that there is an outpouring of respect for somebody who's lost their life at an early age. I really do. We shouldn't take
and it'll be a
away
cathartic experience for those who are there, which is quite important, to actually come together because they want to grieve somebody, as you say, who they've grown up with. I can understand why they would want to go there in the rain and be there together.
Fair play. I mean, it is pretty awful. But, I mean, it's not a new phenomenon either, is it? People memorialising, especially pop stars. I mean, we've been talking about this, that you remember back through all of the really big deaths, you know, sort of Kurt Cobain and people like that, Amy Winehouse more recently. And there's always been that feeling that you know them because the music is one of those things that touches you, and it's a very personal thing. So whatever music you like, someone else may not, but they really are a big part of your life at a certain point.
And these young people here, they came of age with Liam Payne, didn't they? I mean, that's the whole point, that they were teenagers when they began as fans, came of age with him, and that's one of the tragedies of him. He was came into adulthood as a star on something that was time limited. I mean, you can't be in a boy band when you cease to be a boy, and it must be an awful come down after that point.
It's an incredibly tragic story, and obviously thoughts with Liam's family and friends. I'm Dawn Newsroom, this is GB News, and there is loads more coming up on today's show. But first, let's get the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you. The top stories. The Health Secretary will promise to turn the NHS into a neighbouring health service as he launches a major consultation about the institution's next decade. Wes Streeting is set to invite patients and NHS staff to take part in a national conversation to shape the government's 10-year plan for the service next week. Millions of people are also set to receive health monitoring smartwatches as part of Labour's plan to save the NHS. Announcing the consultation today, Mr Streeting said if we want to save the things that we love about the NHS, then we have to change it. The Prime Minister says the whole country is behind Sir Chris Hoy following his terminal cancer diagnosis. Sir Keir Starmer posted on X saying, "Such sad news. Chris is a British sporting legend. To face his diagnosis with such positivity is inspiring." The 48-year-old's been given a diagnosis and has 2 to 4 years left to live. Sir Chris told the Sunday Times, "As unnatural as it feels, this is nature." He also told the newspaper he's known for a year that his cancer is terminal. In February, as he was undergoing treatment, including chemotherapy, Sir Chris said he felt forced to reveal his cancer diagnosis publicly. He's the third most decorated British Olympian of all time, with 6 career golds and 1 silver medal. Now, fans in the UK and around the world are holding vigils this weekend in memory of Liam Payne, the One Direction star who died on Wednesday. A memorial event has taken place in London's Hyde Park, with fans encouraged to bring letters, drawings and flowers. A minute's silence will also be held at 3 and 4 o'clock this afternoon. Bandmate Zayn Malik announced he'll reschedule his US tour after the heartbreaking death. And Liam's sister also paid tribute to her late brother. Liam's father visited the Casa Sur Hotel in Argentina yesterday, where his son died after falling from a 3rd-floor balcony. And King Charles and Queen Camilla joined a church congregation in Sydney earlier today for a Sunday service on the first day of engagements on their tour of Australia. It's the King's first visit to Australia since he became monarch 2 years ago. It's also the biggest trip the King has made since starting cancer treatment in February. Their 6-day visit to the Commonwealth country will involve celebrating the nation's people, culture and heritage. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More news in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Now, there's plenty more coming up on today's packed show. But before I tell you what we've got lined up for you, the lovely Nana Requer is here, and she has got her show starting at 3 o'clock, which is always brilliant. Nana, what have you got for us today?
Well, we're going to sort of follow up on the whole stuff with Wes Streeting. He's talking about the NHS and how he wants to save it, and they've put down a plan for 10 years. Well, are we prepared to give them a full 10 years so we can see some changes? But the question is, do we believe that they can actually save the NHS? Wes Streeting, one of his biggest things that he's uncovered are smartphones or smartwatches so that we can monitor people, but monitoring people just simply isn't good enough. Where will they go? He's talking about things in communities and things like that, but as far as I can see, that pretty much already happens, care in the community, because you can't get a space in a hospital. So my niggle will be focusing on a lot of that as well, and we'll be discussing that throughout the show. Plus, we'll go live to the US and have a chat with Paul Duddridge. He's the host of the Politics People podcast, and find out what's happening stateside. Apparently, word has it that Donald Trump is now ahead of Kamala Harris, 55 to 45. So loads more and some great guests on the show.
Brilliant. That's one to watch, definitely. That is Nana coming up at 3 o'clock. Now, remember, you can chat to Nana or to me. Let us know the thoughts and all the stories that we're discussing and Nana's got coming up. Very simple, visiting gbnews.com/your say and joining our conversation. Loads more coming up on this show before Nana, though. Labour is considering extending the freeze on income tax thresholds beyond 2028 to raise $7 billion towards addressing a £40 billion budget shortfall. But what does that mean for the pennies in your pocket, if you've got any left? All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson. We'll see you very soon.
Good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, it's been a wet and windy start out there, all to do with Storm Ashley, bringing some very strong winds, especially to northwestern parts through today. And this is that deep area of low pressure named Storm Ashley, and you can see a real squeeze in those ice bars, indicating some strong and gusty winds. There are Met Office warnings in force, an amber one. We could see gusts of 70, possibly 80 miles per hour, especially through this afternoon. Outbreaks of rain then continuing to push their way eastwards, drier behind across parts of Wales and the southeast of England, but blustery showers across Northern Ireland and Scotland. Otherwise staying rather mild, highs of possibly 17 or 18 degrees. So as we go through Sunday afternoon and into evening time, further spells of rain coming into Scotland. Again, we still have that amber wind warning in force, and that's also coincided with some high spring tides, so could lead to some disruption here. Further outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland as well. Again, some strong gusty winds coming up from the south and west. Otherwise across Wales and southwestern parts of England, drier here with some cloud across the far southeast. So through Sunday evening and overnight, cloud and rain continuing to push their way north and eastwards, with the strongest winds then pushing their way eastwards across Orkney and Shetland. Still staying blustery, but further towards the south, largely cloudy and staying rather mild too, with temperatures up at around 11 or 12 degrees. So blustery still across the north through Monday morning, with showers moving through quickly. Further towards the south across Wales and southern parts of England, hazy sunshine, largely dry, but we may see some outbreaks of rain across the Channel Islands and towards the far southeast of England as we go through Monday. Otherwise lighter winds here, but temperatures a touch down. Bye-bye.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, though. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. I hope you are having a wonderful Sunday afternoon out there. Now, we're not going to depress you too much because it is a Sunday afternoon, but we're going to talk about Labour and tax. Sorry. They're considering extending the freeze on income tax thresholds beyond 2028 to raise $7 billion towards addressing that $40 billion budget shortfall. This is like the black hole with knobs on, I think. Chancellor Rachel Reeves may also propose new taxes on vaping products in the upcoming budget. Despite Labour's manifesto promise not to raise income tax rates, Sir Keir Starmer insists the party will adhere to its pledges, even if tax threshold adjustments occur. So I have Nigel and Claire here, and they are so sweet. They've just shared a cup of coffee. It's lovely. Yeah, that's a sweet thing. Claire, I'm going to come to you on this one. Labour's manifesto, we're not going to do anything that's going to affect the working people. Hello?
Well, what's a working person? We can start with that definition. It would be really, really helpful. But I think I think they're quite clear that they weren't going to raise income tax. However, there's a big however, they are looking at national insurance increases for employers, not employees, which it generally does affect the employee as well if people aren't going to employ people.
Employers
it's a bit difficult.
That aren't working people.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a small business.
Yeah, and the one that I've had brought up with me more often than not was the single person discount on council tax. And that hasn't been ruled out. They may well look to remove that 25% discount that you get for living on your own and what that would mean for those people. And I think that's a really nasty way of looking at tax increases. If you're going to a person who lives on their own, you're going to disproportionately affect women, because it tends to be women, especially older women, who are living on their own if they've lost a partner or a spouse. And also those with a disability or those with caring responsibilities. What about the single parents living with their child?
It hasn't. This hasn't happened yet, by the way.
Yeah, but you can see they have never ever ruled it out, and we know full well.
Well, they can't before the budget.
Unless they specifically rule it out, but they're quite happy to rule out stuff that affects working people. They're quite happy to, not put those arguments to bed, but not this one. And I do find it a little bit, I suppose, tricksy of them to dance around the fact that they are going to do it. It is going to affect
we don't know that's going to happen. I mean, it's been one of the ones
muted. Do you want to have a bet on it? Because I think you absolutely will. If you've got this apparently now 40 billion black hole, started at 19, got up to 20, 22, and now we're at 40.
But for a start, the three biggest taxes are income tax, no rise in income tax for anybody, although the thresholds may stay frozen for longer, which means more people will be dragged into the taxation dragged into tax. But there's no increases, so that's the manifesto commitment, no increases in either higher rate, additional rate, or basic rate income tax. VAT will remain the same. Employee national insurance probably will go up on the basis that it's a big tax. It raises about 170...
Employee or employer?
Employer. Did I say employee?
You did.
That was certainly
I thought we were getting a little exclusive.
He knows something we don't.
No, I didn't mean employer. Many apologies. And that's a tax that raises over £100 billion a year, so big money. So a rise in that.
But they said they weren't going to touch national insurance.
No, they said they weren't going to touch national insurance for working people.
Well, I mean, so people running small businesses aren't working people.
Yeah, well, they are in the sense that on the income tax thing, for instance, it wasn't about whether you're rich or not very well off. Even additional rate income taxpayers will not have any extra tax to pay at this budget.
This is a government that absolutely hates those small and medium-sized enterprises, because those are going to be hit so hard if you are looking at an increase in employers' national insurance contributions. Those small to medium-sized businesses employ people, so it is going to cost them more. So they aren't going to.
Quick comment. Unfortunately, we've got to go to break.
Obviously, it would depend how much they increase it by.
In any case, it's not just. You're very angry about this one, and it's the new poll today is that Labour's policies, they're in the popularity is in a free fall because of all this. The latest poll has the Conservatives been. It's the first time the Conservatives have been ahead since Boris Johnson was Prime Minister just 5 months ago. So Keir Starmer's party led Rishi Sunak's Conservatives by 15% in popularity on this issue. So. Not going too well. I'm Dawn Newsroom, this is GB News. There's lots more coming up on today's show. Councils are increasingly replacing parking meters with smartphone apps to reduce costs. But is this abandoning the older generation? Or that much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you soon.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, up and down the country, many parents are preparing or have indeed already sent their child off to university.
Indeed, but sometimes it can leave parents struggling to cope with the, quote, empty nest syndrome their child leaves behind. So joining us now to discuss how to cope with sending off your sprogs to university, or not so sprogs, is broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy. Nice to see you this early. This is a real thing, isn't it? It's our colleague Paul Coitz, our sports expert, describes it as grief, sending your young adults off to uni and leaving the nest for the first time.
Yes, I think grief is the right word because it's an ending. And it's not just an ending with your relationship with your child. It changes from here on in. But it also is very much about your identity. Your identity as a parent is weakening. You'll always be that child's parent, but you're not going to have the same involvement on a daily basis. And so you're left to think, OK, well, what does my life look like going forward? What's my relationship? If you're in a relationship with a partner, how is that going to change? And like all elements of grief, there's going to be a bit of a process. There's going to be that transition period where you adjust to your new life, just as your sprogs, as you call them, are adjusting to their new, exciting phase of their life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
There you are. Welcome back. It's the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. And now, this one of my pet hates, which is why we're talking about it, actually. Councils are increasingly replacing parking meters with smartphone payment apps to reduce costs. But this shift is frustrating many, especially older drivers who struggle with the technology. Campaigners argue this reliance on apps is age discrimination and could deter some drivers from using the roads. Additionally, hidden charges and fees within these apps are raising costs for motorists. Like we need any more cost in our lives, isn't it? And it's not just older drivers, by the way. It is actually 28% of drivers of all ages are distrustful of this new payment technology. And if, like me, you've stood in a car park recently on your phone in the rain trying to get out 15 minutes the other day. Why are we doing this? What's wrong with a meter where you put coins in?
Well, I mean, I would rather have that. When it comes down to the parking apps, I let Claire sort out the parking apps because she seems to be rather better at it than I am. I was trying to do it the other day like you, in the rain. It took me 15 minutes to tap in all the bits about the card. Claire wasn't around, otherwise I'd have got her to do it. And what I don't understand is, even if you don't use cash, I think there should be a cash alternative, but if you don't use it, why can't you do the same thing as you would do...
Tap a card?
Tap a card as you would do for a rail ticket or something like that. It's simple and easy. The app's really complicated, and I didn't even know about the hidden charges until I read this piece.
Yeah, and it's all of the apps that you have to have. So it wouldn't be quite so bad if it was just one parking app. So you knew that if you were parking in different companies. I've got 4 or 5 on my phone set up, and you have to keep looking and go, right, which car park am I in? What's the code for it? Where am I? Who am I? What day of the week is it? And the hidden charges, if you're doing something that's meant to be much more cost effective for everybody, why are they adding on an admin fee for me doing all of the work? Standing there, putting it all in. They don't have to come and empty a machine. It's all done through an app. But they're charging sort of 80p's worth of admin. For what? For what? What is it they're doing? Yeah. But the irritating thing in some areas, and I know this sort of for coastal areas, is that you are supposed to use a parking app when there is absolutely zero mobile phone signal in the car park you're standing. So how do you get around that? So there's no signal, you're standing there, you can't put coins in a meter, you will get a ticket. So you have to sort of wander up the road and hope for at least a bar's worth of signal to come in.
Yeah, we actually did that the other day. We were on a cliff-top car park. There was no mobile service anywhere near there. So I don't know what you're meant to do. And when we were in a supermarket car park as well, there was a cliche, but a little old lady, and she was struggling on her phone.
Yeah, well, I can understand
and she was lucky
that.
enough to have a smartphone to be able to do it. She was struggling. She gave up.
Yeah.
She literally drove out and didn't do her shopping.
Well, I mean, it seems to be they've privatised it effectively by, well, they certainly franchised it out to private companies to go and do this. I don't see why the local authorities, if it's their car park, shouldn't be doing it themselves.
But it's not just local authorities, is it? It's wherever you go. It's train stations, it's supermarkets, it's restaurants in certain areas, out-of-town shopping centres. Some of those will have, you know, different parking apps installed. So it's not just local authorities. I mean, we can point the blame at them for a fair bit, but in all honesty, this is now taking over every car parking situation.
But there's also a scam going around. I don't know if you've seen this one, a scam with like a QR code you scan to help you download the apps that you don't want to download in any case, because it's really irritating.
But that's the problem with all
technology.
technology.
That's a sticky that's been put over the real one.
So scammers.
But that's the other problem with technology, that very soon the criminals move in because they're obviously much better at using these apps than we are.
Yeah. Well, certainly you.
Yes.
You could be a criminal mastermind by the sound of it, Claire, to be honest with you.
I think it's just a slightly higher level of competence when it comes to apps, to be perfectly honest. But it does. I mean, it irritates me every single time. You just want to be able to go and get a little ticket to put in your windscreen and have fun with it.
To this. I mean, there's basically two big companies that are running this. They control literally 85% of this.
Yeah.
I mean, how have we got to this situation where ordinary people can't even go and park now?
But I think it's a situation where the companies come up with the idea, the people who run in the car parks think, hey, we can do this with somebody else actually doing all the work, and we'll just collect a bit of extra money. And that's basically what's happened.
In any case, we've come to the end of the show. Thank you very much, Nigel Nelson and Claire Pesso, who are still talking to one another. Yeah, but the stable is ready. Claire has got a horse, by the way. It's not Nigel's stable, although you never know, do you? But thank you very much for watching. It's been a pleasure to have your company. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. You'll enjoy it a lot more if you sit and watch the lovely Nana, who is up right now at 3 o'clock. A cracking afternoon of entertainment coming up for you. But first, let's have a look at what that weather's doing for you with Catherine.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We've got Storm Ashley crossing the UK today, bringing some very strong winds, especially towards the northwest, with the rain gradually clearing towards the south. This is that area of low pressure named Storm Ashley. You can see a real squeeze in those isobars, indicating some strong and gusty winds. We've got an amber warning in force, gusts of up to 70, possibly even 80 miles per hour, with outbreaks of showery rain through this evening and overnight. Drier towards the south, across Wales and southern parts of England, with lighter winds here as well. Otherwise staying rather mild tonight, generally lows 10 or 11 degrees. So as we start Monday morning, it is still going to be windy, especially across Scotland and towards Orkney and Shetland. Again, gusts 50 to 60, possibly even 70 miles per hour. There will be some brightness to start the day across eastern areas, though, through Monday morning, but showers already moving through across parts of western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Towards England and Wales, though, it is going to be largely cloudy, especially the far southeast you go, perhaps even with some outbreaks of rain to start Monday morning across the Channel Islands. So as we go through Monday morning and into the afternoon, blustery showers continuing across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Towards England and Wales, though, largely dry, some hazy sunshine, cloudier towards the far southeast, where we may just see some heavy spells of rain. But there will be lighter winds out there compared to Sunday. Temperatures a little bit cooler at around 15 or 16 degrees. So through Monday evening, showers continuing across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Towards the south, though, largely dry with clear skies as we go into Tuesday. But Tuesday leaves sunny